Hey, so a few days ago, I was browsing the GraphQL subreddit when I came across a question asking about whether someone should use a GraphQL client or should they just use Fetch, and why would you use a GraphQL client instead of Fetch? Now, I haven't responded to that just yet, but I wanted to create a video with some of my thoughts, and I'll go on to share that video there and obviously transfer this video into text and post it on there. But I've been a big advocate over the years for using Fetch with GraphQL. Sometimes it's just easier, quicker. You don't need a lot more than to just send a HTTP request to a GraphQL server, and that's perfectly valid. But GraphQL clients do tend to do a lot more than just send requests. There's a lot of kind of DX nuances that you can gain, and benefit from using a dedicated GraphQL client. So recently I've been using Next.js 13 and I've just been using Fetch to make some of those requests. But as I've been also creating a lot more kind of single page applications with React and Relay and other frameworks, I do often use a GraphQL framework because they do more than just fetch data. First, a dedicated GraphQL client like Apollo Client or Relay, they control and take care of so much complexity for you as a developer. And this includes tasks like caching and data normalization and updating the UI, also managing local state as well. So in contrast, I think native fetch requires so much more manual setup for every request. You often have to create wrappers around fetch to handle things like, is there an error? What should the data be returned as? Peek into the data to see if there's an error because, it might not be, it might be a 200 response, but it could contain some errors like validation errors that you kind of want to throw to the client. So yeah, the developer experience is also, it's much greater. You have a much greater developer experience when using a dedicated GraphQL client. Because like I mentioned before with that data normalization, a lot of those clients also have automatic UI updates. And a lot of kind of development tools come with that as well. So these GraphQL clients have dedicated tools that you as a developer can take advantage of in your development environment, and get and learn a lot more about kind of the request as well. And I've created a video on some tooling recently with a GraphQL Network Inspector, I think it was called, which is a great kind of browser add-on that doesn't care too much about GraphQL. What GraphQL client you use, obviously it needs to be making, it needs to be observing things that are making GraphQL requests over fetch on the client. And I think that's where a lot of these GraphQL clients will benefit you. If you are making client requests to a GraphQL API, you probably will benefit from using a GraphQL client. Otherwise you just have to manage all of that, what I've mentioned before, on your own. But I think the key mechanism of any GraphQL client is essentially the caching mechanism. Urkel, Apollo client, they store the result of every query in a cache and uses that cache to avoid refetching data. And this is a feature you would typically need to implement manually with native fetch. So yeah, use a client. And I mentioned briefly before around error handling. That's also another area where GraphQL clients just honestly, they excel. They provide an out-of-the-box strategy that saves developers a significant amount of time when working with a GraphQL client. And I guess another point would be GraphQL clients take care of not error handling. They take care of error handling. I just mentioned that, but they also take care of real-time updates as well with subscriptions. So if you are using an API that has GraphQL subscriptions, well, the client is most likely going to handle that socket or that connection for you automatically, or there'll be kind of a plugin that you can use. But that works with the cache and all of the other things that I've mentioned before. It kind of just takes care of all of that, and you haven't got to manually set up all of these things and deal with updating some cache somewhere. It's just all automatic, which is really cool. And I guess to some other degree, GraphQL clients can batch single queries into a single request, or batch multiple queries into a single request rather, to avoid these duplicate requests. That requires a little bit more configuration and setup, but GraphQL clients can do something like that perhaps, which improves the performance by reducing the amount of data that's sent over the network, because it's able to just fetch and do and send what it needs to get what bits of data. I guess where I'm coming from with that thought is things like the relay compiler. It's able to kind of compile a query just for the components and the data dependencies of those components. I think is another advantage to using a GraphQL client. Maybe that's a little bit more, that's a little bit more outside of the typical GraphQL client box. Not too many people jump to use Relay, out the gates. But it's certainly somewhere, I think, a place that a lot of developers end up at because of all of its kind of, the experience that you get as a developer using Relay is far greater, I think, than any of the other clients. But we'll leave that for another video. And I think also if you're somebody that is working with React, Angular, Vue.js, any framework these days, whatever framework you're used to, there's most likely going to be some kind of integration with one of these clients. And you haven't got to kind of write all of that boilerplate code yourself. And I think if you're taking advantage of other things in the GraphQL ecosystem, or you have a provider that allows you to use persisted documents, or automatic persisted queries, or whatever it's called, whatever you name it, that support can be often baked into the client as well. So it's able to kind of know, okay, this component of this data or this page is requesting this document. Here is its hash, and that's all it sends to the server, which is pretty cool. Now, obviously, you could do that with Fetch, but I think the client takes care of a lot of that, which is a huge benefit as well. So I guess to summarize, while Fetch is an option for GraphQL queries and mutations, a dedicated client library provides a host of extra features and conveniences for you as a developer. Not only does it make your development process easier, but also results in a more robust application at the end of the day, I think. So yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts on why you maybe would want to consider using a GraphQL client. Of course, there's probably a ton of other reasons as well. But let me know in the comments what you think. And what are the reasons that you use a GraphQL client? I'd love to hear. So please give the video a like, a share, and subscribe if you are not already.